All right. Welcome back, everyone. Wow, that sounds very loud. It's really a great treat to have this entire panel devoted to the phenomenon of mobile money. This is something that is the topic focus of research of an institute which I direct, the Institute for Money, Technology, and Financial Inclusion. And you'll be hearing presentations that kind of speak about the work that we've been doing at the Institute. Just a quick word before I introduce our speakers. First of all, I want to note that Stephen Musoki could not be with us today, and so the part of Stephen is being played by Gawain Lynch, whom I'll introduce when it's his time to speak. But mobile money is sort of a phenomenon that kind of grew from the grassroots in parts of sub-Saharan Africa when people who were using prepaid mobile phones realized that they could send airtime to each other, either actually sending the airtime from phone to phone, or just sort of sending the secret codes that you would enter into your phone to top up your phone, sending those codes as text messages to another person as an alternative currency, as a means of payment, as a mechanism for settling debts. The mobile industry took note of this. The operators started to see that people were buying airtime, putting money into the system, but then never actually having it come out again, using it as text or as voice calls, and started to go, huh, what's going on? And employed a few people, including some anthropologists and ethnographers, to go to places like Kenya and Uganda and see what was going on. And lo and behold, they discover a whole kind of airtime trading system. Mobile money represents a kind of formalization of that informal practice, and you'll be hearing a little bit today about what it's meant in the lives of the poor in particular, but also how it's helped really shape an entire research agenda around some of the unanticipated affordances of mobile devices and the airtime system. So with that, let me introduce our first speaker. Erin Taylor is an economic anthropologist who does work on material culture, financial practices, and development in the Dominican Republic and Haiti. She's currently a postdoctoral research fellow at the Instituto de Ciencias Sociais at the Universidade de Lisbon. Erin.
Well done.
Yep. De Lisbon.
Thanks a lot, Bill. That's Wayne's. Yeah. Hi everyone, thanks for coming today. I'd like to begin this talk with two questions for you to ponder on while I'm speaking, which I will somewhat endeavour to answer. The first one is mobile money a social good? And the second one is, what kinds of alternatives might mobile money provide? So we first began doing research on mobile money and mobile phones in Haiti following the earthquake in January 2010. At that time, we started researching people's financial behaviours to look at the possibilities for developing the mobile money system. This was before mobile money rolled out, so we're looking at remittances, routes by which people sent money informally, and the spread and the use of mobile phones to assess what mobile money could be if it did develop, which it actually did later that year. Now, at this time, Haiti was a kind of country that was known for being the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. It had just had a major earthquake. Later in that year, there were also political crises, and that was part of a long history of what have been lots of political crises in Haiti. So it's a kind of place that you don't really think about when you think about technology and the cutting edge. However, after the earthquake, that all started to change. There was a big push to invest in technology in Haiti in various forms, and over the next couple of years, a few different initiatives developed. The first one of those was mobile money, which was developed as a way to initially to send money after the earthquake, because banking infrastructure had proved quite unreliable. And I'll come back to that in a minute. The second one, which has been somewhat more recent, is the use of biotechnology in creating bank cards for savings and loan associations in Haiti. And you'll see there's a picture here of two women and they're holding up their bank cards which have their fingerprint on them. So that's another kind of technology that's rolling out, not just in finance but also as a tool of government governance. So there's a move to try to record bio-information for everyone who is getting a national ID card. And the most recent development has been Surtab, which is an Android tablet manufactured in Haiti, literally in a factory located just on the outskirts of Port-au-Prince, and that's been recently developed. So all these kinds of things are changing the way in which Haiti is seen. So what can we say about this kind of movement towards technology? Well, it's part of a global move towards what many of you would know as ICT for D, which is using different kinds of technologies such as computing in developing countries to stimulate economic growth and kind of in a way of by leapfrogging processes of industrialisation that have taken place elsewhere and incorporating people into this system. So Bill Maurer talked this morning about finding new rails for financial services, and in a sense this is what people are trying to do when they deploy technology for that kind of development. But what's interesting here is what you're getting is this kind of meeting up of commerce with development ideals. So you've got this profit angle and you also have a social angle. So what people say about these kinds of initiatives, and especially microfinance, is that products which are developed for poor populations are supposed to meet this double bottom line of turning a profit and also providing a social benefit. So mobile money is important as one of these initiatives because it is very easy to get access to. So whereas, say, a computer might be a bit more difficult to come by, or you might not be near the bank that gives you those, bank cards with the fingerprints on them, mobile money networks are far more available to many more people. The technology is very simple. In order to use mobile money, you just need a handset that's connected to a network. You don't need a smartphone. You don't need a bank account, and so it's very easy to sign up to. And this is one of the reasons why non-profits have pushed it around the world. And you'll see on this map, this is my most recent screenshot of GSMA's mobile money tracker. Every time I give this talk, I have to update this picture because there are always more and more deployments around the world. These are the latest numbers that I could count myself really off the map. So it's becoming very, very widespread. So what I'm trying to do to talk about these kinds of products and try and get to that idea of what is the social benefit versus what is the profit motive is I use this concept of the social good. And the social good, by that I'm trying to say, well, these are private goods, but they kind of in some ways have aspects of public goods, at least if not in the way in which they're accessed, in the intent that is behind them. But in order to understand what is that social good and what is that profit motive, we need to look at both the supply and demand of mobile money, and that is what I'm going to do in the rest of this talk in relation to Haiti. Now, in Haiti, after the 2010 earthquake, by the end of the year there were 2 mobile money services, one of which was Digicell's Chocho Mobile and the other one was Voilà's T-Cash. Now, Digicel recently bought out Voilà's T-Cash, so while I will refer to them, they are no longer a part of the picture. So let me just turn to the demand side. I want to have a think about who mobile money is for, who might want it, what might be its uses for the everyday people. And in this, it's worth thinking about this idea of what is an alternative. What kinds of alternatives does mobile money provide? So there are probably lots of categories, but 3 main alternatives that it might give to people. One is an alternative to formal banking systems. The first picture in this trio is a line outside a bank in Haiti. These lines can be very long and it can take a couple of hours to do a transaction, and maybe when you get to the counter, the system's down and you can't do it anymore. So there's a lot of time involved in accessing banks. Furthermore, bank branches, about 70% of them are actually located in Port-au-Prince itself, not the rest of the country. So as you can imagine, they're very difficult to access, and only about 10% of the Haitian population actually has a bank account. The second picture depicts a system whereby boats are used to move money around informally, and this particular picture is of a trade route in the south of Haiti, and these boats take 7 hours to travel between towns, and so again a very slow way of moving money. But who might be the typical user of mobile money? So we're looking at the third picture is actually bringing up a security issue as well. So when you're travelling with money, you can run the danger of losing it if you're robbed or if you simply misplace it. Now, what's interesting about this third picture is it's a Digicel ad for Chochomobile, which presents an example of who they might see as a user. And this is an elderly woman. She's going to Digicel to make a deposit because she's sick of storing money in her home because her nephew keeps on stealing it. This is kind of, in some ways, it's a similar image to what M-Pesa present in their ads in Kenya, where they show also an elderly woman who's receiving money, but this time from someone who lives in town. So a different intent, but still the same class of user. But it's worth stopping to ask, who are the users of mobile money? Are they really these elderly women? Is it the young? Is it the urban who are mostly using mobile money? Is it the rural? And how are they using it? Are they using it to send money, receive money? What can we learn about who these users are and what that might tell us about how mobile money actually works as an alternative and not just what it might do as an alternative? Well, one interesting thing is that in the early days of mobile money especially, and to some extent today, the typical user of mobile money in Haiti was not that woman in the photo. The typical user of mobile money was actually an NGO. So in the early days of mobile money, the people who are really using it and the people who are really demanding it were organisations such as Mercy Corps, who used mobile money to deliver food money with which people could buy food. So conditional cash grants. There was World Vision, who were paying cash for work payments to their workers. Today there's an organisation called Pathfinder who are using mobile money to pay the salaries of their community health workers. And this is significant because this group makes up a very large amount of the demand for mobile money. Thanks. And that matters because that is telling us something about what that demand is and who mobile money is an alternative for. And in this case, to a large extent, it is the NGOs. And of course, the people who they're giving money to as grants are also users. But in those early days, a lot of the people who signed up for mobile money actually did so because they needed to receive their aid. There were a lot of people who registered for mobile money in response to Digicel's advertisements. But in terms of the active users, a lot of them were actually these people attached to NGOs. And in fact, Voila, who are no longer with us, the telephone company, one of the prizes that they won from an initiative that I'll talk about in a second was a $1.5 million prize that they got for having a high number of transactions. But the interesting thing is that when they won this prize, they really didn't have an active agent network around the country. So people couldn't go and deposit money, they couldn't go and withdraw it, and that is very much because most of the transactions that were taking place were related to NGOs in one way or another. Okay, so that is the demand. Who's driving supply? Well, in many ways, again, you're getting this merging of profit and non-profit interests, and not necessarily that sort of ground level involvement that you might get with something like, Bitcoin, for example. Again, we have the non-profits, we have USAID and philanthropic organisations that very much bankroll the development of mobile money in the early days to the tune of $10 million in prizes that were given to the telcos for various goals that they met. Now, this is actually quite common around the world. The thing with microfinance products and mobile money as well, which can be seen in some ways as a microfinance product, is that they have very low profit margins. So it can be difficult to reach what is called scale. You have to get a large number of customers in. You have to resolve what's called the chicken and egg problem, whereby you need people to sign up, but they won't sign up unless there are enough agents, and people won't become agents unless there are enough customers. So you get a lot of NGOs, non-profits and so on in the early days bankrolling this stuff. And their interest is fairly obvious if you take a look at it. We could actually imagine there are many reasons why USAID might be interested in developing mobile money around the world. One of it is the fact that mobile money can be used for so many things. As Bill Maurer and other people have pointed out, it's a kind of a platform, and you can do all sorts of things with it. You can pay salaries, you can circulate money, you can offer insurance products, you can offer credit, as is being done in Kenya with Michael Joseph and M-Pesa. So there are many reasons why they might do that. Turning briefly to the commercial side, Digicel are also, of course, there to make a profit. If they weren't going to make a profit, they wouldn't offer the product. However, even if we look at the company, that boundary between profit and social benefit actually becomes quite blurred as well. One of the reasons why is because Digicel are very much focused on their corporate responsibility, social responsibility angle. When they first launched in Jamaica in, I think it was about 2001, if I remember correctly, they started offering products that were specifically designed for people who didn't have a lot of money, such as their Call Me service, whereby you run out of credit, you can send a message to your friend to call you. They did the same thing in Haiti. In 2007, they introduced their own mobile phone service to Haiti, and within a very short amount of time, mobile handsets and mobile call costs had gone from being almost unaffordable to being accessible by almost the entire country. The result of this is that people don't really see Digicel as a company that's out to take their money. They see Digicel as something that provides more social benefit than NGOs, more social benefit than the government. So the roles of who is providing the social goods have kind of been switched. Digicel have such a strong presence that they even sponsor street signs in Port-au-Prince. So if you walk around, you see the Digicel sign everywhere on top of the street signs. And they also have initiatives through the Digicel Foundation, such as funding schools. So for them, mobile money is an extension of these kind of corporate social responsibilities. And moreover, it's seen as such by many Haitian people, to the extent where people will say things like, oh, you know, God sent Digicel to save Haiti, and things like, oh, if you go and ask someone, oh, do you know what mobile money is? We had people respond to us, I've never heard of it, but if it's Digicel, I will sign up, because Digicel never lie. That's a pretty massive compliment to give to a company, and it really stunned me when I started to realise how people see this company. So it's difficult to separate that public and private interest. So how do we actually think then about whether mobile money is a social good and whether it's providing an alternative? Well, there are numerous ways we can look at this. The interesting thing with mobile money is that, yes, it provides alternatives. It can allow you to skip bank lines, it can allow you to keep your money secure, it can allow you to make transfers without having to travel great distances. But mobile money is not an alternative to the broader financial system. It is quite the opposite. It integrates people into that very financial system. If we want to talk about an actual alternative to the financial system on the island with which Haiti is a part, Hispaniola, a better example is actually the community that I wrote my book about, Materialising Poverty, which discusses a squatter settlement in Santo Domingo where people simply slowly built their houses up over many years and sometimes generation as they got money coming in, bypassing banks, bypassing the need to take out a mortgage, for example. And they did this in such a way that I've written about this community as being too big to ignore, in a similar way that many of the large banks are in the United States, because they all came in, they built their communities, and eventually there were so many of them that the government could not move them on. There was nowhere to send them. So they stayed, and they haven't yet gained land titles, but they gained traction in the system. They could not be pushed out. So that also, just that, financial products aside, that act of building something which you're investing in to such an extent where people can't budge you, that itself is a financial alternative. Just summing up briefly with respect to mobile money, what I would like to say is that if we want to assess the social good of mobile money, we do need to look at those pictures of those people on the ground, such as that woman hiding her money. They exist. We need to take into account that micro perspective. But we also need to take into account a macro perspective, because what we are talking about with mobile money is a step on the way to financial globalisation. And that in itself is beset with various risks, including privacy issues, such as we saw with the biometric data collection. Brian Holmes this morning was talking about creditism, and mobile money, of course, can be used as a way of offering people credit as well, which could be very useful, but also is beset with risks. Of course, credit tends to spread through a financial system, so the more people you involve from all corners of the world, the more people who are also exposed to that global risk. And there's also the point in which capital, once it enters a financial system, tends to be reallocated from the periphery to the core. That generally happens. That's why we have things like cities. And okay, that could also be a useful mechanism, but you do need something in place which will redistribute that capital to places where it's needed that can't necessarily afford the interest rate. And that is something that microcredit organisations are trying to do. And finally, what I think we also need to do is also take a step back and look at history, because the globalisation of finance isn't new, but nor is microcredit. There's a guy called David Rudman, who's actually now with the Gates Foundation, who talks about how Jonathan Swift, author of Gulliver's Travels, used to give microcredit himself. He used to give out loans to people. And just to finish, this is my email address, and I've written up a kind of a reverse version of this paper, and I've already published it on my site, so if you want to review anything, that will be there. I'm also going to write a short blog about today's event in total, and also I'll write up a blog summary of our panel as well. So the other guys' papers, if you want more information, I'll try to make sure that's on there. And just one little housekeeping note, if anybody wants to join our financial history walking tour of Amsterdam, it's on Sunday morning from 11 till 12:30, and there's been a pamphlet circulating around, so if anyone's received an email from Patricia, you probably already have it. If not, just feel free to contact me and I'll send you the information. So thank you very much, everyone.